6 years ago, I was working 5 different jobs at once, and together they paid me a total of $55,000. But last year in tech sales, I closed over $500,000, and the company I helped build across the Asia Pacific called MoveWork was acquired for $2.85 billion. I'm going to walk you through exactly how that happened. Not just the acquisition, but how I ended up here. Every job I landed and every decision I made as a result, especially the ones I'm not proud of. Not so you can copy and paste the same outcome I did, but because everyone told me tech sales was for a certain type of person. Private school, polished, born with the gift of the gab. And I was never that. Honestly, I never thought it was even possible to make that much money from a job. Even now, I almost can't believe it. I'm a girl from Pitt Town, a rural farm suburb north of Sydney, where your neighbor knows everything about the town and the local pub is the main attraction. When I grew up, the plan was you work at Coles or Woolworths, the local grocery stores, and you drink on the weekend. But I was a personal trainer and I played semi-pro football, and I never finished my uni degree. Truthfully, I actually got fired from a football club. And before I got into tech, I had never met a single person who earned over $100,000 a year. I knew it was possible, just not for people like me. So if there was ever someone who wasn't supposed to end up here with 3 investment properties, it's me. And that's kind of the point, because by the end of this, you'll see the thing that took me 6 years to work out. None of this was a personality trait I was missing. I didn't need to do voodoo mindset tricks. I just needed to learn these skills. And I'm going to show you the whole timeline, start to finish, so you don't have to wait 10 years like I did. Let me take you right back, because everything that happens later gets built here. Before any of the money, before tech existed to me, I was a personal trainer and a semi-professional footballer. My whole life I've woken up at 4 a.m. since year 9 after I got kicked out of high school and went to a sports high school. It was train before school and train after school and even during school because it was a sports school. Then as a PT, it was the same alarm. At 4 a.m, the same alarm went off, driving in the dark, opening the gym early in the morning, and purely I felt like I wasn't feeding myself first before I was helping others. Having a 1-hour break mid-morning before getting into the 2nd or the 3rd shift for that day. The split shifts were exhausting. And here's what the life actually looked like. Hours on end of the floor, and one day doing the math and realizing that if I wanted to earn more, I had to physically be there more. Every extra dollar cost an hour of my body inside that gym floor. Fitness is my true love, and it still is. But somewhere on that floor, I worked out that loving movement didn't mean movement had to be my career forever. What I couldn't see yet, and this took me years, is what all those 4 a.m. mornings were actually building. Building the muscle that gets you out of bed when your body is begging you not to. This turned out to be the exact same muscle that picks up the phone for the 50th cold call after 49 people telling you no. It was never talent, it was a willingness to keep up, showing up when you felt uncomfortable. Sport built that in me years before sales ever cashed it in. I just needed something to point it at. And my first crack at pointing it anywhere was a sales job. I won against 300 other people to land a role at the NRL, for a room I technically shouldn't have been in at all. My first proper sales job was selling memberships for the Penrith Panthers, an NRL club similar to like a gridiron or something like that in the US. They ran it as a competition. First of all, it was 300 applications for people that had finished uni, but I hadn't even basically started uni. And so I accidentally got part of that 300 candidate. And by the end of that cohort, I actually got selected as the job. So when I got to the last few folks working for the NRL, they had 4 of us at the Penrith Panthers, then go and stand on one side of the stadium each, and whoever sold as many memberships in that night actually got the long-term full-time job. Throughout that whole process, until I signed the contract, I didn't actually tell anyone that I hadn't finished uni yet. This is what I mean by I shouldn't have been in the room. But I got the job and the reality set in. This was pre-COVID, 5 days a week at the desk, and for someone whose whole life had been around movement, being chained to a chair was quietly driving me insane. And I also had to work weekends or late nights depending on when the NRL games were. So I left. With all of that, I then left for a couple months and I actually got rehired back into the sponsorship team. I actually thought I missed it from that point when I'd left. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. After a couple months being there, I actually started my own thing on the side, which was a women's sports agency. And this is part I'm not proud of, but I posted a photo of the CEO on my agency marketing without even thinking of it, and it slashed my sponsorship job completely. I was immature and I didn't clock how bad it was, which is sort of the point. It looks bad because it was, but at the time I was very passionate about female and sports, and I really thought it was something that I was demonstrating to help get more women into sport, which was sort of part of my job, but I appreciate the confliction there when I was obviously working another full-time role. That all meant I got fired. My boss and CFO called me into the boardroom, sat me down for a very awkward chat. I had basically the talk of shame, and I knew me and my boss had a very great relationship, and it would have been very, very hard for him to have that as well. There was nowhere to hide, and the walk of shame after basically having been told I was fired, going back into the office was was a terrible feeling. And really from there, I was just trying to hold my tears in before I got out of the job. At the time, it was humiliating, fired from a football club over something entirely self-inflicted. They'd also given me a $5,000 bonus at one point at that job, and I remember feeling so grateful. The detail matters later because I had no idea what existed outside that building. The commissions were capped at the NRL. The whole world was capped. The NRL bubble, the sports bubble, it's very tiny and it barely exists outside of Australia, and it had a ceiling on the same way everything else did in other sales industries. Getting fired felt like the worst thing that ever happened to me. Looking back, it's one of the best things that ever happened because it showed me out of the door I was way too comfortable standing in anyways. However, after that, I went into basically the worst year of my life. That year really shook me. I was working 5 different jobs at the same time, really just trying to figure out what to do with the next step of my life. I had no degree, I'd just been fired from a role, and I had really lost confidence at that point. The worst job I've ever had was in operations at a media company, building spreadsheets, putting advertising panels out into the world. And I worked out pretty quickly that I could do my 8-hour job, 8 hours a day, and I was basically getting it done in 1 hour. Here's the part that broke something inside me. It didn't matter smashing it out an hour or dragging it out across 8 hours. The pay slip was identical to the cent. It didn't matter how much effort I'd put into the job. That was the year I was working 5 different jobs to make $55,000. The other sorts of roles I was doing that year was laying turf. I went back to personal training and I was working some odd jobs here and there. The days were exhausting, waking up at 5 a.m. again to coach in the morning, straight into the operations role, and then on the weekends I was laying turf. Days were long and it felt like I was on a constant hamster wheel. And the feeling wasn't tiredness I want to be exact about. It was the dead flat boredom I was experiencing, effort with nowhere to land. That's when it all clicked for me. The problem was never how hard I was willing to work. Anyone who's up at 4 a.m. has that part covered. The problem was the ceiling I was in. Every one of those jobs was built so the number of the pay slip couldn't move no matter how good I got. I didn't need to work harder. I needed to get out under from that ceiling. I just had no idea where out was. It turned out to be the other side of a wall in my own house. During this whole period, I met Gabe, my long-term partner that we've been together for 8 years now. And just before that, COVID hit. Suddenly I was working from home at that operations role. And so me and Gabe set up next to each other on a desk. And because we were locked in the same house together, I started overhearing Gabe, my partner, and she just had got into tech. All day, every day, through the wall, I was listening to her calls. One call I specifically remember overhearing, and the conversation sounded very impactful on the project she was working on. She had full autonomy and action for bias, along with the numbers they were talking about for these deals were absolutely mind-blowing to me. It's really the moment for me when it all clicked, when it made me realize that all businesses run on technology. And 2 things landed at once for me. 1, this world existed, whole companies, whole careers that nobody in Pitt Town had ever mentioned to me. It sounded genuinely cool. And number 2, she was earning way more than me at the time. I'd love to tell you the trigger was the same grand vision, and it wasn't. On $55,000 in Sydney, I couldn't save $1. When Gabe and I met, we were $50,000 in debt, and the honest trigger was wanting more out of our life and our family long term. Not anything flashy, just stability and room to breathe in the future. And I need to be straight about the doubt too, because I'd assumed before I'd got in, I needed a degree, needed to be technical, and I thought you needed to know certain people in the room. Watching Gabe up close for months is what broke that. She wasn't doing magic through the wall, she was doing a skill. So I went for it, and I landed my first tech sales role. And for the first time in my whole working life, effort and rewarded were pointing in the same direction, and I was finally on the right side of it. But getting the seat and surviving the seat are 2 completely different things. My first tech role at Splunk, one of the biggest cybersecurity companies in the world, and I came in as an SDR, which is a sales development representative, which is more of the junior roles when you first get in. Splunk has now been acquired by Cisco, but it was purely cold calls, cold emails, rejection after rejection when you're in that role. And I won't romanticize it, because early on, the math of that job is that no is most of what exists. 49 people telling you no before 1 says maybe. There were days it felt like I'd made a mistake, like everyone had been right about the certain type of person, and maybe I wasn't it after all. Here's what I worked out on that floor, and is the realization that changed everything for me. Nobody is born knowing how to do this. I stopped treating every no as a verdict on who I was and started testing the whole thing like training. Reps, more feedback from my manager, exactly like footy. The 4 a.m. muscle finally had somewhere to go. And it compounded. By the end of the first year, I'd hit 150% of my number, my sales target, and cracked over $100,000 for the first time in my life. I basically earned double the amount I had been doing the year before. The girl making $55,000 across the 5 different jobs had doubled her income that year, and the number I'd spent my whole life believing was the ceiling turned out to be an entry point. Then I did the thing everyone told me was a mistake. I left this safe global trend to become the only person doing my job on the entire continent. I was ready for my next challenge to become an account executive, and I left for a company called MoveWork, and I became the first person on ground for the entire Asia Pacific region. I wouldn't suggest most people being the first person on ground. However, for 4.5 years, I was the only sales rep in Australia carrying the APAC region. This 4.5 years was almost like a decade of learning, and I want to be honest about what that feels like, because from the outside it looked glamorous. From the inside, it's you alone building a market from zero, selling a product nobody has heard of, and no local team to lean on. It could be isolating at times. It was isolating in a way I'd never felt before, but also it was the most electrifying time I'd ever experienced inside a role and personal development. It's also what it cost. I came off social media for 4 years, deleted it all, and went all in on this skill. Though I was the only sales rep, I didn't do it completely alone. I had my partner in crime throughout this whole entire thing, who was my solutions engineer, and we were counterparts to make sure every deal got closed effectively. Half those wins have their name on them too, and so it was me and my team member that really did this. But we built it, $0 to $7 million US in revenue over that period of time, and we closed 13 straight quarters closing net new enterprise logos, which were 20 total logos in total. And somewhere around the third deal that we had closed, the self-doubt starting to quiet, because once is a fluke and twice is a good quarter, but when you've carried an entire region on your own for years and it keeps working, you're forced to admit it's not luck anymore. It's a system, it's a skill, and you're the one who built it. The seat compressed 10 years of that experience for myself into 4 years. Being the only account executive on ground means you have to do much more than just closing deals. Most of the times you're doing your own outbound, you're having to do customer success work, and you're really being that bridge between the whole sales motion from entry to close, and also making sure that they're really successful. Doing marketing events by yourself, you're having to go into these large enterprise organizations when you're probably a bit younger than most of the people you're selling to. And so you really have to overcome that imposter syndrome. And while I was heads down doing all of that, something I'd bet on years earlier, something completely out of my hands, was quietly coming to a head. The timing was luck, but the picking wasn't. Because MoveWorks got acquired by ServiceNow for $2.85 billion, I joined a pre-IPO company before any of that was certain. So I had shares that had been vesting across a 4-year cycle, and part of my pay in paper that the whole time could have ended up worth nothing. And when the acquisition went through, that paper became actually real money. When you work for a pre-IPO company, it's always part of the mission to IPO or get acquired. Although it's never the end goal, it's a huge milestone for everyone on the team for what they've been building over the years. I recall when I got the call so clearly, and had been on the road for about a week at this point, and I was 40 minutes away from home. And my boss called me and told me the news basically before 48 hours before everyone was going to be told in terms of like the news articles. And so we had this 48-hour period to really soak in what had just happened. And it was the most insane feeling, insane call that I'd had. And straight after that, I'd called Gabe and let her know the exciting news, as this is something that we talk about constantly on our morning walks, is like, is this going to happen? Is this possible? And so to see that all come to fruition over that period of time and sticking it out during the hard times was a memory I will never ever forget, that really carries me forward in any business endeavor that I do. Just sit with how surreal that is for a second for myself. A girl from Pitt Town who'd never met a single person earning over $100,000, and inside that sold company, and MoveWorks sold for almost $3 billion, right in the middle of that AI boom. Now I know exactly what that sounds like, because I'll be thinking it too. She got lucky. And part of it I did. The timing, the size of the number, the boom itself, nobody controls any of that. And anyone who says they've planned that part out is absolutely lying to you. But here's the part that wasn't luck. By the time I chose MoveWorks, I'd learned what to look for. A product that was a must-have, not a nice-to-have. Real growth already happening, serious investors behind it, founders worth believing. I'd worked out the reps matter, but the rocket ship matters just as much, because I'd already lived the other version, being capped in buildings where no amount of good made the number move. 6 years earlier, I couldn't have told you any of that, but I'd learned to pick the right company and to make sure that you're working for the right managers and leadership. But the payout is the part that everyone thinks they want. So let me actually show you the money and the bill that came with it. First, the bill, because it is real. The quota shadow. In sales, there is always a number over your head. Every quarter, forever. I got better at carrying it, but I never found the version of this job where it actually became easy. And the trap of this industry is comparing yourself quarter to quarter against others in the team. I had to learn to stop this though. 4 years off social media. which I've told you. What I haven't said is how all in that actually was. This had my entire focus and every day of it. I'm such a believer that well begun is half done. And if you can dedicate your focus to something for a period of time and leverage that, it will be insane results, the focus you get from it. Now the money. In my last year at MoveWorks, I earned over $500,000, and across my time in tech sales, I've earned over $1.6 million before the shares. And it's genuinely mind-blowing how fast life can change, because when Gabe and I met, we were $50,000 in debt. But here's the honest bit about what the money actually did. Because it wasn't fancy cars, we kept living like I was still on $55,000. With every raise, every commission check, we invested in ETFs first, then property, and the portfolio has now grown over $3.5 million. Income changed our numbers. However, we refused to inflate our lifestyle. We always kept a 50% savings rate every time our income increased. And the thing I don't say enough, for years, I was the least experienced in every room I'd walked into. That's the part I love the most. I never once stopped being stretched and pushed out of my comfort zone, which makes what I did next sound completely insane, but also I was ready for the next jump. I left MoveWorks and ServiceNow once we got acquired. Why should anyone walk away from a $500,000 seat? It's a fair question. There are mornings I've asked that myself. Here's the honest answer. I've left MoveWorks and I've built Double Triple to teach the exact path I had to piece together completely alone, standing at that wall listening to Gabe. And the thing that stops me in my tracks is watching it work on people who aren't me. We've taken someone from childcare into a six-figure role in 14 days, someone from real estate on $80,000 into a package of $170,000. People from medical sales, from professional nannying with no sales background, or even in tradie or technical backgrounds from field technicians, all walked in the same door I did. Literally, we have videos where Gabe and I are on the calls and we literally are tearing up or happy dancing when someone lands a role. We have clients, partners messaging us up to how we have completely changed their life. We've built a community where sometimes people are unemployed for 6 months, and when they come through the program, they are now employed into tech sales. A lot of the times they're also landing bigger packages or base that they have never earned in the past. We have physios that come in that have done 4 years as a uni degree and they potentially feel like they have sunk cost fallacy, but when they already swap out their 6-day shifts for a hybrid work lifestyle, they already feel like it's worth it. Making money over the years has been one thing, but how the tech sales industry changed Gabe and I's life from the lessons we have learned and the people that we've become is something that will never leave me, and I can't wait to show other people how to do the same. And that's the realization I want to end on, because it's the one that undoes everything I was told. The path is teachable. It was never a personality you had to be born with. It's a skill, and the skill can be handed over. And the people who need that the most are exactly the ones being told they don't fit. The ones from the wrong suburb, with the ones with the wrong CV, who've never met anyone earning over $100,000 and quietly don't believe it's allowed to be them as well. I know that person, and I was that person. Every one of those jobs, I thought I was behind. The 5 jobs, the firing, the 50th call of the day. I wasn't behind. These were the lessons I needed to learn, and I just paid the full price for every single one of them. And the whole reason I made this is so you don't have to. If you want the path laid out properly, come join me in my next 90-minute live session. The link's in the description below, along with the 500K tech sales playbook if you'd rather start there. Either way, I'll see you on the other side of the wall. Thank you so much for watching, and if you hit like and subscribe, I really appreciate you following the channel.